Welcome into another episode of Odd Man Rush. Hope you're all having a great week. I'm Will Highland, joined by Kyle Diezel. It's our last episode before the Four Nations face-off begins. So we'll spend a lot of the second half of the show talking about that, but we will also start the first half of the show by talking about the trade deadline and the playoff race because we are right in the thick of it. But Kyle, before we do any of that, how are you? And can we get a weather report?
I'm doing well. No complaints here. Busy with work, of course. Weather report. Probably got about a foot of snow from the snowstorm this past weekend. However, we are getting two more storms this week. Looks like one's Thursday and then another one next Saturday. So just making things more entertaining, for the Four Nations face-off here that's coming up on Wednesday. So let's get rolling.
I agree. I agree. Let's get rolling for sure. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the games ahead in the Four Nations and also the stretch run of the NHL regular season heading into the playoff. And you talk about the snow on next Saturday. It might not be the only storm in Boston coming because we're going to have quite the playoff race and then possibly the championship, including the United States, next 2 weeks from now. But we'll talk about that more later. Kyle, where I want to begin is the standings. And the standings at the break are still tight. There's been no movement. If anything, they're more if anything, they're more confusing than before.
Oh, I agree on that one. 100%. I think,
Because let me put it to you this way. Had the Bruins not screwed up in their last 2 games, they'd have 57 games played and have 64 points. The Devils have 68 points in 57 games. The Bruins and the Devils have played more games than anyone else in the conference except Florida, Pittsburgh, and Philly all also have 57 games played. And the Bruins, had they not screwed up, they would have only been 7 behind Florida, who's the second best team in the conference. So, like in the Bruins, you look at them and you're like, there's just no way they're a playoff team. You look at the Rangers early on in the season, you said there's no way they're going to be a playoff team. Ottawa, 62 points, 56 games played. They're the top wild card. Detroit has won 7 out of 10. The Islanders have won 7 out of 10, but they've lost the last two. They had won like 8 in a row at one point. Last time we talked, Kyle, we talked about how it was basically everyone but the Islanders and the Sabres in the Eastern Conference playoff race. So, I mean, there hasn't been much movement. I don't think Montreal is really in it. I don't think Pittsburgh's really in it. Um, Philadelphia, I really don't think is in it. They're still celebrating their Super Bowl win. Um, but I'm really down to the Rangers, the Bruins, the Blue Jackets, Detroit, Ottawa, and Tampa to take up 3 spots. So
yeah,
that's one, two, three, four, five, six teams for 3 spots. That's how I see it right now. I think the Islanders are also in it, so maybe call it 7 teams for 3 spots to be generous. That's how I see the Eastern Conference shaking up right now. We haven't learned anything in the last few weeks since we talked.
no, we have learned nothing. We still know the obvious. The Capitals are definitely running the East. It's not even a question of it. Best team out there on the East Coast. Could say they are the best team in the NHL, but that's pretty much a toss up between them and Winnipeg. But that being said, I mean, like you just named it. I mean, the Devils could fall out of playoff contention for all I know at the rate they're going. They're playing like absolute shit. I'm not going to put it in any other terms. Yes, they have injuries going on. Hopefully, the 2 weeks off will allow their captain to come back and their star goaltender to come back. But I think Detroit's the most surprising team right now, and Ottawa. Those two teams we both thought wouldn't be talking about making the playoffs. But now I think what Detroit is or it's like 7-3 in their last 10 games. Ottawa's 5-5, and they're right there. I mean, the Bruins and the Rangers are teams who have been there and done that to make the playoffs. But Shesterkin's gotten hurt, so I wonder if he's going to be healthy when he comes back after these 2 weeks off. We've already talked about with the Bruins. Their issue has been, can they score? The answer still is they can't provide. If the team scores 3 or more goals, we've seen that they can't really keep up with a team like that. And those are games they're going to have to win. Blue Jackets, I think, is for both of us the biggest surprise right now,
Yeah,
being
for sure.
up there in conversation. I mean, I think we had them toward the bottom, even behind Ottawa and the Red
Yeah.
Wings. Don't know if this is just feeding off the momentum they have, the tragedy that happened this year to their captain. So I'm wondering if that's maybe fueling this team to go up and beyond to next level.
Hmm.
The fire also for the Flames. But is this where Pittsburgh starts trading away their vets? Is this the time we see the end of the great dynasty era in Pittsburgh potentially? You think?
Yeah, I mean, you went through a lot, so I'll answer the last one first. I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, I don't think they're gonna do that. I don't think they're gonna trade Crosby. They might trade Rickard Rakell, because he's having a really good year.
Yeah,
But I don't think they trade Crosby. No, not for his, not unless they retain a ton of money because that's a 8.7 salary that some team is gonna take on. So I'm not convinced of that. Unless they want to do right by him. I don't know. I don't know. My gut tells me no. Same thing with the Bruins and Marchand. If they fall out of it, my gut tells me no on both. Um, as far as the other teams you talked about, we've been waiting for Detroit and Ottawa to be good for a few years now. Like I've been told for at least 2 years that this is going to be the year that those two teams challenge for a playoff spot. And so they're finally doing that. Detroit got hot at the right time, right before this break
yeah,
to get themselves back in the mix. Maybe you get a spark. Larkin's going to be playing in this tournament. Um, maybe you get a spark out of him and out of this break still for the last, 25 to 30 games of the year. Um, I am I am of the opinion that I don't think Columbus can hold on for this long. Um, they they're without Monahan right now. They're gonna be without Marchenko for a while. Those are arguably some of their two best players, and they've gotten production out of some other guys. Boone Jenner, James Van Riemsdyk. They've been able to patch it together. Um, I think Columbus is going to have their work cut out for them, and they're going to need. I mean, Werenski's having an amazing season,
yes,
Norris level season, but they're going to need a lot more if they're going to be without Monahan and Marchenko for the rest of the year, or at least until the next month or so. They're going to have their work cut out for them. It really, to me, it comes down to, and I know we've talked about this in the Eastern Conference specifically, and you brought it up a little bit. Do you trust Columbus and Ottawa, or do you trust Tampa, Boston, the Rangers, even the Islanders, a team that's made the playoffs in recent seasons? Like, who do you trust more? Like, do you trust that the Bruins are suddenly going to be better if Hampus Lindholm can come back?
mm-hmm.
Because they've really missed him. Their special teams has been dreadful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, here's the thing though. I'm looking at these 5, 6 teams. If I'm going to be honest, well, I don't know if I trust any of these current 6 teams who are battling out right now for these 2 wild card spots. I really don't know if I trust any of them. I think maybe the Rangers with the move with Miller, but they haven't looked consistent. Bruins, they just haven't been able to score. You talked about the lack of firepower.
Other than Pasternak, who's been the best player in the league since New Year's,
Yeah,
they've been nobody.
yeah,
Yeah.
is this the year we start seeing a change of like maybe it's just luck of whoever they've got remaining on their schedule that they pull out these victories? This is what it's going to come down to, unfortunately. Not
Uh,
saying
that's a possibility. The other thing to keep in mind about the Eastern Conference is the Metro Division is pretty much I mean, you mentioned how the Devils could fall out of a playoff spot. I think they'd have to really bottom a little bit. Um,
Yeah, just a little bit, but it's still
e-
possible.
but okay, but let's consider for a moment that the top three in the Metro stay where they are.
Hmm.
That means that really Columbus and the Rangers and the Islanders are at a disadvantage because they can't get into the playoffs any other way.
No,
So the good news about the Bruins and the Lightning and the Senators and the Red Wings is that there's actually three ways for them to get into the playoffs.
I mean, I still wouldn't count out the Toronto and the Florida. They can still fall out. They're only 2 points ahead of Tampa.
Yeah, I think the pace is going to be what's hard. I don't think like the pace. I see your point, and I don't disagree with it. It's just I think the pace is going to be so much that they have built-in points
Yeah,
over basically everyone. Um, and everyone that they're competing with, everyone but Washington and Carolina. Like they have built-in points, and I think the Panthers and the Maple Leafs are fine. But my larger point was more that Tampa can get in as a three, they can get in as the wild card one, and they can get in as the wild card two. So often the wild cards tend to be one team from each division, but it doesn't have to be that way.
no,
And so I think that's a benefit for the Bruins and the Rangers and the Red Wings and the Senators and the Lightning. Or sorry, not the Rangers, the Bruins and the Red Wings, the Senators, is that like, it they're all going to play one another. I think the Bruins have 2 games left against the Lightning, 1 game left against the Senators, 1 game left against the Red Wings, and 1 game left against I think they still have an Islander game left. So like the Bruins will play all these teams. Those teams will play the Bruins. I mean, and or the Devils will have their chance. The Carolina Hurricanes might have a chance to stick in that 2 spot and not slide down to 3 or vice versa. I mean, there's still opportunities all over the Eastern Conference for this to move more. So that's why like so many Bruins fans were upset over the last game, and I was very upset about the last game. But I and I think the players should still try, no matter what team you're on, should still try and compete for a playoff spot, even if it looks grim. Because as you pointed out, it might come down to luck. So you might as well try. But
correct.
I'm personally not going to sell my soul to this Bruins team or to this Ranger team or to this Red Wing team because, and I'm not going to die on any of these hills because it's so hard to read.
Correct. We still have also like about 2 months left of game, so like there's
Right.
still plenty of time. Do you think? Do you think there's any move? Do you think is going to happen from the Eastern Conference to make someone out of those bottom five teams jump up as a potential? They're going to make the playoffs now.
Well, see, the hard thing is I don't know who's going to be a buyer. It's a seller's market for sure because there's not a lot of teams selling in the Eastern Conference, right? Like
No,
the Sabres might sell. I don't really think so. The Flyers might sell. They were at one point up in the. I mean, they're still only 6 points out of a playoff spot. But the Flyers, the Penguins you talked about, Montreal, like none of these teams I'm really believing are gonna sell, and that also means I really don't think those teams are gonna buy either. So much of the Eastern Conference, I think, is already settled. The more likely teams to buy, in my opinion, considering that the Rangers and the Hurricanes have both already picked up big pieces. I think you're more likely to see a Western Conference team like Colorado or Edmonton be a buyer. I don't think there's any big names that I'm left wondering are going to get moved because the Canucks have moved Miller. I don't think they don't need to move Pedersen, however you say his name. What do you think? Do you think there's even a star on the board? A star that would make a difference on the board? I don't even think there is.
no. I said. I also think. I think this is going to be a quiet. basically off season or not off season for trade
Trade
deadline.
deadline. Yeah.
I don't think there's many moves any of these teams can make because it's just so like competitive. We just talked about it's just within less than 10 points for making the playoffs. Like I don't think any team's going to be. No one on the East Coast is trading with each other. It's just not going to happen. They're going to have to trade to the West Coast because they don't want to play someone that they might have to play again in conference or in the playoffs. So it's got to be traded out west, just like what Carolina did. However, I think that Carolina trade is going to be a 1 year deal. I don't think they're going to sign him back. I think this is their push for the Canes. But I don't think anyone in the East is going to give up any assets unless it's a true superstar. But I just don't know who's giving up anything also in the West besides maybe Nashville. They've got older talent, but can you trust them to be healthy in playoff time?
Well, and a lot of those guys are old and they have anchor contracts. I,
Correct.
I am of the opinion that I don't think there's not a name out there that I'm like a big name that I'm gonna say that guy's gonna move
Yeah,
because
no.
like the big pending free agents right now are all on teams that are in the playoffs. So like Marner's a pending free agent. I mean, he's not getting dealt. Duchene's a free agent. The Stars are holding on him. There's no like Mikko Rantanen was the guy, and even him, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Avs had held on to him. Maybe they should have in retrospect now that the cap's going up. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be a slow trade deadline. What I'm seeing more of is some of these middle line players, and this is why I think it's a seller's market. If the Bruins, for example, just because I know them the best, te end up bottoming out the week or two after Four Nations heading into the trade deadline, sure, maybe they trade Carlo or Coyle or whatever, but the more realistic scenario is that they trade Trent Frederick, who's a pending free agent, to a Western Conference team for a second round pick or something, and then trade Brazeau for a sixth round pick, and that's all they do. And then they call up their guys from Providence. That's what you're gonna see. Very, very similar that to them is the Senators aren't going to sell out their first round picks for this team. The Senators aren't going to sell out Brady Kachuk, right? Like they're not going to sell their in competing for the playoffs, but they're also not going to try and go out and make this team a cup contender if they're still in the middle of a retool. Think of the Devils a few years ago. They got Timo Meyer, didn't really cost them a lot. Um, and or did you get Tyler Toffoli one of those years?
We got Tyler Toffoli and we got Timo Meyer.
Yeah, but you didn't sacrifice the future by doing that because you knew
Yeah.
you probably weren't going to win the Stanley Cup 2 years ago.
No. Yeah. We didn't. We knew we
Right.
were.
And so that's where the Red Wings are. That's where the Senators are. That's where the Flames are out west. I mean, none of these teams are going to completely sell out for anyone, partially because there's no one to sell out for.
Yeah. No. It's. I think it's just got you're gonna have what you have now, and it's gonna be whatever you can put together is what's gonna be that stretch, which is kind of an odd thing to say, but I think the biggest players have been moved already.
Yeah, we saw JT Miller move. We saw Mikko Rantanen move, and those were the.
That was really it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there wasn't a third trade. I
Mm,
forget. It wasn't as big.
I know Frost. I think what's the Flyers.
Yes, it was the Flames and the Flyers made a trade.
Yeah, that's really was it for like the big move. So I think we're
Kuzmenko yeah ended up on the Flyers. But yeah, let's talk about the West for a second. I mean, their wild card race isn't as interesting. You've got I'll pull it up here just to make sure I got it right. You've got Van and Calgary 3 points apart.
yeah,
Then you've got a big drop off, another 3 points. Then you've got Utah and St. Louis, and then it sort of drops off drastically from there. Um, I think the Canucks could still sneak in despite trading off Miller and being a dumpster fire of a team. Um, they've withstood a lot of adversity with their goaltender injury and the locker room drama. Calgary has played really well at home this year. That's why they are where they are in the standings. I mean, I think Vancouver's trying to hold the band together and compete for that final wild card spot in the hopes that they don't completely blow up all their progress. But they just traded JT Miller last week. Brock Besser is a free agent. Quinn Hughes is a free agent in 2 years. Uh, I'm not convinced that they can keep the band together out there. So perhaps Calgary sneaks in. Perhaps it's Van. What do you make of the West wild
Yeah,
card race?
I think the West is pretty much kind of set. I mean, you've got your top. You really have your top six teams. I don't think they're really changing, except for maybe Colorado swapping in and out with Minnesota and Dallas. But besides that, I mean, it's and the Knights and Edmonton switching in a 1-2 spot. I think it's pretty much locked in. Vancouver can kind of get knocked out by the Flames. Maybe Utah can squeak in there, but that's really it. I think, like you just talked about, I think Vancouver's on that stretch of it's do we keep trying to make a push or do we just disband and start from kind of scratch? Because Demko, I don't think is going to be back to himself of winning the trophy again. So I don't think he's got a shot there just because of his injuries cost him, I think, too much. And I don't know. I mean, too much drama on a hockey team usually leads to bad things all the way around. So I don't know. I think it might be time for them to just start from scratch because the way the news has gotten into this, you need a fresh start. To be honest, Vancouver just needs a fresh start. They should probably, if it's not making it this year, look to trade before the deadline or in the offseason, look to make some moves to get rid of players before they lose their value.
Yeah, like they could trade Brock Besser to a contending team and get a high pick.
Correct. I think that'd be the best move for them to save them, get them good investment in return. Like I said, I just don't think even if they make the playoffs, they are a team to worry about currently, especially in that Western Conference. I don't think any of those top six.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. The West is just too good. Otherwise, I mean, it's too good. Otherwise, Vegas. I saw them the other day. I mean,
They're looking like their mold selves, and they won the Stanley Cup.
yeah, they're looking good. You've got the Avs looked pretty good when I watched them. Then we've had a couple Western Conference teams visit the Garden recently.
Winnipeg.
Minnesota is really good on the road.
Oh yeah, they did have a cold trip. They fixed that. Dallas, phenomenal all the way around. Deep
Yeah.
bed. I'll make a run last year. Winnipeg.
Edmonton and Winnipeg, yeah. I mean, the West is just really good. But we saw it last year. You came out of the West and you were beat up. The Oilers were beat up. They had that 7 game series with the Canucks, and then
Yeah,
they had a really tough series against Dallas, and they were just beat up by the time they got to the Stanley Cup final, and then they roared back. I mean, Connor McDavid was like on fumes
correct.
in
The big thing, like I brought up last year, the question is they can be hot now. Or are they hot in the playoffs? Like we talked about, Winnipeg's hot now. Wild time.
right.
We talked about both of these teams being the two biggest choke artists in the Western Conference.
They
Can
are.
that next step? I mean, you probably have Kyle Connors, who's probably up there for Norris Trophy right now, the way he's playing this year. Probably have goalie of the year
For the
as well.
heart, yeah, for the heart. But yes, I know what you mean.
Have Hellebuck just playing out of his mind. Can these
Yep.
playoffs? We saw last year you had that in Hellebuck and didn't carry in transition for you guys to go on. Same with the Wild. Had a very fabulous put together team. Didn't go far. Like those are two teams I worry about once it turns playoff time.
Yeah, the regular season is all about seeding, and then you get the playoffs, and literally anybody can win anything. Which is why I don't want any team to overreact
No,
to the first 54 games of the year, because or 58 games of the year, whatever it is. Don't tell a NHL vet that you've got 25 games left to go. Maybe you should sell. No, if you're in playoff contention, they believe they can win.
Yeah.
And and that's why it just matters so much. I mean, I'll use this as an example. The 2017 Bruins were a train wreck. They fired their coach, Claude Julien, in the first 2 weeks of February. They came back, they made the playoffs, and they lost in 6 games to the Senators. And the Senate every game was decided by 1 goal, and the road team won every game. And they had no business making the playoffs. 2019, the Blues were in last place in January. They won the Stanley Cup. So, like, if I'm any of these teams, I go into this trade deadline. I'm not making any rash decisions about anything.
No, I'm not really deciding till knowing which teams are hottest or predict to be the hottest until March. I think mid March starts deciding which teams are going to go far in the playoffs and which teams aren't. If you're
Yeah,
not stepping it up, and we also talked about it, it's a huge difference between regular season and playoffs. It's a huge different atmosphere. Like you talked about, it's just all about seeding, getting there, and then once you get to playoffs, it's takes it to another level compared to other sports. I would say.
yeah, I agree. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, speaking of something we're looking forward to, this is gonna be a lot of fun. Four Nations Face Off.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming out on a Tuesday night. The first game is Wednesday night. This is coming out right before Canada takes on, I believe, the first game is Canada and Finland, right?
I think so.
I think so too. So we've got Canada and Finland. We've got Canada USA on Saturday. We've got Canada or USA Finland and then USA Sweden next week. So we've got, unless you've been living under a rock, I can just pull up the schedule here. We don't have to guess about it.
Let's see. We got Canada and Sweden on Wednesday. Then we got USA Finland on Thursday. Saturdays Finland Swedes, and then USA Canada.
All
And
right.
then
I was a day early on all that stuff. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. We've been talking about it for a while. Back in December we reviewed the rosters,
mhm.
which was a lot of fun. But now the lines have showed up. So I'm gonna read Canada's lines. We're gonna talk about it, and then you can read America's lines, and we'll talk about that. And then if we have time, we'll jump into the other lines and maybe make some predictions. But Kyle, Canada's roster is well, let's just say offensively lethal. Sam Reinhart, Connor McDavid, Mitch Marner, top line, very good. Mark Stone, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, second line. Seth Jarvis, Braden Point, Brad Marchand on your third line. Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, I believe is his name, and then Sam Bennett on your fourth line. They're going to be hard to play against.
Absolutely.
Um, Dylan Tays and Cale Makar, the Avalanche teammates, on your top line, on your top defensive pairing, I mean. Shea Theodore and Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty slides in for Petrangelo. I think that's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
considering Drew Doughty is like Mr. Canada defenseman. He's been with them all the way back to 2010 Olympics. I think that's the right move. Josh Morrissey and I believe his name is Adam Periaco. They don't have first names. I think it's Adam is his first name. First names I'm not great with. And then I think it's Travis Sanheim is their depth defenseman. Travis Konechny is not listed, but he's also on the roster. And then your goaltenders, it looks like Aiden Hill is going to get the start over Bennington and Montembeault. What's your reaction to Canada's projected lineup?
I mean, that's a lot. I don't know how you really stop that firepower. I mean, it's pretty. The team knows how to score and know how to move the puck. I mean, that's that first line, second line is very lethal, followed up by two solid lines. I don't know if there's any team right now that can really compare lethally and with the most experience than Canada has right now. But their biggest weakness is goaltending. So they could
Really?
score
Is it though? Because two out of those three guys have won a Stanley Cup.
the way they're playing this year. I think Aiden Hill's the best choice to start, but I do think there's other teams out there who have much better options for goaltenders.
Well, it's interesting because Logan Thompson is Canadian, took an interesting route to get to the NHL,
Yeah,
and then was pretty good alongside Aiden Hill that year. Um, and turns out he's not on the team. He's having a great year. If
correct.
not for Hellebuck, he'd be in my Vezina conversation. Um, but apparently he doesn't get along with Bruce Cassidy, and nobody tends to get along with Bruce Cassidy. Um, and that's why he's not on the roster. But yeah, I think Canada's goaltending, people are going to make a thing out of it. Personally, I mean, their bottom six is in much better position looking at it now than what I thought in December.
Yeah,
And I think Canada's top six is gonna score on you, but Canada's bottom six is gonna pester the shit out of you and scare you. So
yeah.
it's like
It's
you
a
got Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand on the same team. Okay, you got Cirelli, Hagel, uh, who else was on that bottom six? I mean that's it. That bottom six, those guys,
point.
Braden Point and Jarvis,
You have
Seth
five guys.
Jarvis. I
You
mean
have,
those guys are gonna f around.
yeah, you got Stone on the second line.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean they're not. I think conventional wisdom thought that, oh, Canada's going to be all skill and finesse, and then the USA is going to beat you up. But this is Canada bottom six, and then if you want to throw Stone in there too, and Konechny, honestly, because he's not. We didn't even talk about him. He didn't go to practice, so he's not on that list. But he might slot in there too. I mean, that's a little bit different calculus for Canada, Sweden, or sorry, USA, Sweden, and Finland when going against this Canada team.
Yeah, it's like I said. There's Crosby's been there for years. Cirelli's been there for years. Like there's Marchand. Like that team all together is like been there, done that. They know what they're doing. That entire 12. So it's going to be tough for any team to kind of compete with it. I mean, besides the bottom six being a powerhouse themselves and pestering you like you talked about, you're going to worry about that. But then all of a sudden you're going to see Mitch Marner come off the bench, Connor McDavid come off the bench, and then you just
Yeah,
go right down. Like they're going to exhaust you by the third period, second period. So it's going to be a battle of how do you have enough stamina to compete with these guys? It's going to be the key thing.
I agree. I agree for sure. It's gonna be very interesting to see how other teams match up. I don't know how they're gonna do this. Like who's considered the home team, who gets second change. Um, I don't know how that's gonna work, but I think that might play a factor when all the teams are gonna be as balanced as they are,
Yeah,
and anybody can beat anybody. I mean, we're focusing on the USA and Canada because we're North Americans, but like Finland and Sweden are good enough to beat anybody too. I mean,
they,
it's a team full of all stars.
yeah. I mean, any of these teams can come and rock your socks. Remember, it's only one game that could change the entire trajectory.
Right. And before we get to the USA, let's actually remind the listeners of the rules. I had those written down too. So it's all the same NHL rules, offside, icing, all of that, except for overtime will be 10 minutes long for each of the preliminary round robin games.
Mm-hmm.
So a longer overtime. And they're going to do the 3-2-1 point system, which is 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for a win in overtime or a shootout, and
Yep.
1 point for a loss in an overtime or shootout. And then the top two teams will advance to the one game final, which will then use the 20-minute overtime periods, no shootout. So it will be like an NHL playoff game.
Interesting how they're using the 3 point system instead of the original two, but I get it.
They have to for tiebreakers. It's going to
Yeah,
be easier that way.
no, that makes sense.
But it goes to show that like we'll talk about America's roster in a second, but like if, for example, if Canada wins their first two games in or their first game in regulation and USA wins it in overtime and then they go play each other, that just makes the stakes of that game even bigger. And then it makes basically every game feel like a pseudo playoff game because you have to, every point is going to matter because there's no playoff round. It's going to be the two teams with the best points move on to the
Correct.
final. So I think you're gonna see a lot of now, did it say I imagine because it's NHL rules, I imagine the 10-minute overtime will be 3-on-3.
I don't know. I mean,
It says NHL rules except overtime will be 10 minutes. It doesn't say that it will be 5-on-5.
so then yes, I'd go with that. It's going to be 3-on-3.
So I don't think you're going to get a lot of shootouts if you're going to play 10 minutes of 3-on-3 with all the skill that's going to be involved here.
Do you expect it to be high scoring games?
So hold that thought and let's talk about the USA roster and then we'll get to that because I think that's going to be an important thing when we talk about the predictions. But go ahead and read. Go ahead, Kyle, if you could read the USA lines.
Got it. So for line one, we've got Kyle Connor, we've got Jack Eichel, and we've got Matthew Tkachuk. Line two is Jake Etzel, Austin Matthews, and Jack Hughes. Line three is Brady Tkachuk, Miller, and Boldy. And then for our fourth line, we've got Nelson, Larkin, and Torchik, and Kreider rotating in and out here. And for our defense, I'm probably going to say his name wrong. Is it Salvin? Am I saying it right?
Jacob Slavin from the
Slavin, that's it. Slavin,
Yep,
Fox, Winterskin, and
Werenski and McAvoy.
McAvoy, and then Heffron and Faber, with Sanderson stepping in for Quinn Hughes.
Yes, and so the Quinn Hughes departure is a big blow to the
Yes,
USA. That's too bad. That would have been a lot of fun to watch them play together. They apparently they want him to focus on the
the season and getting healthy.
and being captain of the Canucks, which is a sinking ship as we've talked about. That USA lineup is maybe not as I mean, you don't have MVPs like McKinnon and McDavid, but you still have Matthews, Kachuk, the Hughes brothers, or sorry, the one of the Hughes brothers, uh, Jack Hughes. You also have Jack Eichel, who's won a Stanley Cup. Uh, I mean, that's an insane roster.
I mean,
And
but you're talking about look at how many Team Canada has that have won Stanley Cups and how many gold medals they have won versus Team USA's who's got.
the Team USA is younger.
That's also true. They are a lot more younger. Definitely the farm system, I would say, right now for Team USA is definitely up and coming. So props for
Yeah.
Team USA for promoting it. But I don't know. Like we
Oh,
talked.
oh, quick sidebar, man, while you brought that up. I think
Yes,
in 6 or 8 years, we're gonna have a better. There's gonna be, if you line up the best Canadian players and the best American players, I think the USA will have a significant edge in the next 6 to 10 years. And look, Connor Bedard is a great player. Macklin Celebrini is a great player,
yeah.
but Ryan Leonard is gonna be insane. If you just like tonight, right now, the Bean Pod is about to start. BC and BU are filled with Americans who are effing good at hockey. So it's gonna be, yeah, 6 to 10 years from now, who
Yeah.
knows what we'll be talking about. But back to this tournament, you're right. Canada has experience. Like they've got the Reinhardt's won a Stanley Cup, McDavid's been to a Stanley Cup, Mark Stone's won a Stanley Cup, Sidney Crosby's won three at least.
Yes.
McKinnon's won a cup, Marchand's won a cup, Point's won a cup.
I think Quinn.
Sam Bennett's won a cup. Makar and Taves has won a cup. Shea Theodore and Drew Doughty have won cups. Aiden Hill and Jordan Binnington. That's just off the top of my head.
11 players with Stanley Cups.
And then on the U.S. side, it's Kachuk and Eichel have, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah, because we've even mentioned their goaltenders, which is
Oh yes,
Swayman, and
Hellebuck and
so
Ottinger.
starter for sure.
Yeah,
So like I said, I think goaltending they have plenty of options there. I don't know if they have the power to compete with Canada, meaning Canada's really loading up as a top 5, 6 players, like the first two lines being real heavy at scoring speed and really bolstering that back two lines. I don't see Team USA bolstering that back two lines as much as Team Canada, is how I'm seeing it. So I am a bit worried because Team USA's front, at least four of their front six, are not the biggest guys out there on the skates. A bit worried.
Right, but they did go for size. Oh, I mean, they could have had Cole Caulfield, play.
Correct.
He had a great start to the year, and everyone in December was clamoring for him to make the roster.
Correct.
Um, you know, it, I think the one guy that USA is missing is Tage Thompson.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this in December. Chris Kreider doesn't really do much for me at this point.
No, he's not having a great year. I could see him or Nelson. I could see either of those two being off
Right.
the list.
I would have rather seen Tage Thompson make it over Kreider or Brock Nelson because I still think Vinny Trocheck and Dylan Larkin are good. You know, and Brady Tkachuk, JT Miller, and Matt Boldy. Boldy's having a pretty good year. He's also young. He's very young.
Yeah.
Um, and then the top two lines are solid. But that's my only qualms with the American roster. And then the Hannafin Faber pairing scares me a little bit. Um, Faber hasn't played that great this year. Um, Hannafin I like, but he's going to be I think he'd be a good power play quarterback. Because without Quinn Hughes, they're going to need someone to run that. It's probably going to be Adam Fox or McAvoy. Hannafin might do a better job, but yeah, I see what you mean. Like the USA and Canada game is going to be the game. It's going to be the highest viewed game. Um, but like these teams also have to beat Sweden and Finland.
Correct.
This game. I mean, it's very
Count
easy
them
to.
out.
What was that?
I said you can't count these other teams out because you never
No,
takes one game.
no, because like the Swede team, we won't go through it for sake of time, but both Finland and Sweden are also full of NHL All-Stars.
Correct.
And I think that like you asked the question, are these going to be high scoring games or low scoring games? I think Sweden and Finland would be more comfortable in a high scoring game. But I think the USA and Canada would be more comfortable in a 3-2 game.
I would kind of disagree. I think the way the teams are built this year with all this star strum, I'm expecting like 5 to 6 goals is what I'm kind of seeing. Just the high powered we're seeing from skilled players these days of what you're putting on the ice. I'm seeing a lot more of that versus your average 2 to 3. I think that's just how it's going to be this year. I think it's going to be a lot more high scoring, which I think is awesome. Still close and competitive, but I just see just so much talent, especially for Team Canada, Team USA. Like it's just going to be a lot, which I think that's what fans want. I think that's what the people
Right.
want.
It might happen, but I don't think the teams want to get into a track meet.
But
That's my point. It might happen. You're right. It might be 6-5, but I don't think Mike Sullivan and Bruce Cassidy want to go out there and have it turn into a track meet. I don't think so.
no, I mean, I don't think it. These teams are built. I think it's built to go out hard in the beginning, the first period, and then really bolstering down the second, third periods to see what they can hold on to. Who do you like coming out as the Four Nations champ?
Well, before I say that, I was my only other point, and I don't want to forget, and then I'll answer your question, was that there's a possibility these games are played like NHL playoff games in style,
Yeah.
in that you spend the first 10 minutes establishing yourselves, and then you kind of get into a groove. I think this tournament is set up to try and get you a USA Canada final. The reason being is I think the 3-2-1 point structure benefits the USA and Canada because of two things. USA They've got the goaltending prowess to keep games close, which means they might not lose a ton of games in regulation. They're only playing three.
Yeah.
What you can't do is lose more than one game in regulation. If you lose more than one game in regulation, you're out. There's no mathematical way for you to make the final.
Yeah.
And so, meanwhile, Canada is also built to score a lot of goals and possess the puck a lot. And so it's going to also be very hard for them to lose games in regulation. And so if you made me pick, I think Canada wins the tournament based on the fact that Canada always wins these tournaments. They won the World Cup in 16, they won the Olympics in 10 and 14. It's just they're built for this kind of stuff. It's not the World Juniors. The USA is built to win the World Juniors. But I think Canada is built to succeed in these kinds of tournaments. Short tournament. They don't need Aiden Hiller joining Bennington to be amazing for a 7 game series. They need him to be good for 3 games out of the 4.
Yeah. That's all you really need.
What about you? I
Uh,
think Canada beats the USA in Boston for to inflict maximum pain.
I think
Uh,
I
that's my prediction.
I think Team USA wins the game Saturday, but I think Team Canada wins the overall.
Yeah. So you think the same as me?
I
That's
think,
interesting.
but so going off of that, if Team Canada wins, which player do you think takes the most success from it, carries it back to the regular season with them? Like who puts all that on their shoulders and brings that success to their team? Do you
I think
believe?
it's Cale Makar. Um, you look at 3 years ago, Cale Makar won a Norris. Did he? I think he might have won the Calder and the Conn
Yep.
Smythe as well in his career. He's a big game player, and he's playing for a contract. The cap's going to go up. He might make 14, $15 million a year. Might be the highest paid defenseman ever. He's playing for a proud franchise. The Colorado Avalanche are, and they have cup aspirations. They took a gamble by training Mikko Rantanen, bringing in Marty Necas. They have their sights set on bigger things. They've made little adjustments, and I think without Gabe Landeskog for the third straight year, if the Avalanche are going to get back to where they were, it's going to be because of guys like Kyle McCarr on that roster and his line mate or his pairing mate, Devin Taves. So I think you point to those two guys on Team Canada. Now I'd love it to be Brad Marchand, but I look at those guys and look if the United States wins the tournament, it's gonna be because Connor Hellebuck balls out. And so if he does and he brings that back to this storybook Winnipeg Jets season, then maybe it's them and maybe that's the confidence he needs going into the playoffs. Do you agree?
Man, that's tough. I mean, I think it could, but I don't know. I don't know if I think it would be a huge boost for them. I just don't know if it's enough to help Winnipeg's curse of getting up and beyond, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. I really don't think it would help them because they also are a team who is in Canada, who has two of their best players are playing for Team USA. I'm not sure how the Canadian fans take that. So if that's the case, phenomenal. But I just don't see it. I don't think they're the team that's going to. They're the two players, the team that's going to take the most success out of this. I'm trying to think of players who are currently on this team that would. And I really think it'd be Dylan Larkin for Team USA, who could take this spark and ignite a Detroit Red Wings team to go make the playoffs. That's who I think from Team USA. And then from Team Canada, I'm going to go with the surprise here. I'm going to go with Mitch Marner. It's going to bring
Yeah.
spark out of him. I mean, it's going to hurt Austin Matthews if they lose, but I think it's going to bring up his elevation playing with these guys who have been there, done that. I mean, Mitch Marner's been doing great and phenomenal for 18 years, and he'll be playing with guys who have won a Stanley Cup, won the gold medal. So I think for him, this is what he's going to bring back to Team USA to Austin Matthews. Potentially, maybe this is the year for the Leafs to finally win it all. I don't know. I think that's who it would
True.
be.
The Leafs angle is a look. I mean, the Leafs are the most popular team in the NHL. If you look across both countries, the whole continent,
Yeah,
they get the most eyeballs. They get the most media coverage. You got their two stars playing on different teams.
yeah.
Um,
Unlike Winnipeg, there, who doesn't get like any coverage.
yes, which is unfortunate for them because they're having such a good year. But yeah, I agree with you. And look, like Marner, like Makar's not a free agent right now, but
Yeah,
Marner's playing for a contract. Like he's gonna get a bag of money from somebody. Is it gonna be the Maple Leafs? I don't know. But if he plays at a good level in games that matter. Now I know it's not Stanley Cup playoff games, so Leaf fans are gonna root for Team Canada more often than not, right? So like that might endear him to them a little bit more because
correct.
a year ago they were ready to have his head on a silver plate in on the shores of Lake Ontario. But I am I'm confident in that this either team, USA or Canada, I think one of them is going to play for a medal game. Play for the medal or the championship. I could be wrong. It could be Sweden, Finland in the final. But I think either one of these teams are going to have momentum. Players are going to come out of it with momentum. Um, I look at a guy like Jeremy Swayman, right, and for playing the Bruins angle a little bit. Swayman's not going to play, okay? Like if they don't start Hellebuck, like if Hellebuck gets in a bike accident next week, it's going to be Jake Ottinger.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's probably the third option.
Yeah. But what can Swayman do during these 2 weeks? He can hang out with the probably the same hat that I'm wearing right now in on the ninth floor of a building he's familiar with. Maybe hang out on the bench if they let him on the bench. He can be around guys. He can be around Charlie McAvoy and Mike Sullivan and all these other, American players, and he can surround himself in an environment that's not everyone asking him to be perfect every single game, not carrying the weight of the Bruins for 2 weeks. He's not leaving the Northeast. He can sleep in his own bed when the games are in Boston. And maybe he comes out of it saying, like, if the USA wins, and even if he's a passenger, maybe Jeremy Swayman says, "Oh, you know, that kind of motivates me. I should have been playing in this game. Like, I should have been playing. Like, if I had a better year, maybe I'm playing over Hellebuck or Ottinger. Maybe I'm the guy. I want to play in the Olympics next year in Italy. I want it to be me on this team leading." And I've been sitting around. This has been fun, but it'd be more fun if I was between the pipes. So that's that's an angle that I look at as a Bruins fan and say, could this experience just hanging out with the team be good for Jeremy Swayman? And maybe it is. Who knows?
Yeah, no one knows. Who do you take as the coming out as the MVP of this Four Nations?
So
Who
assuming Canada wins, which was my
doesn't
pick.
have to win? It's just whoever you think is going to be the.
Right, yeah, true. Connor McDavid is known for getting awards when he doesn't win. Just saying. Um, just putting that out there. Like, you win as Conn Smythe,
I disagree.
when you didn't win. It should have been Sergei Bobrovsky. We've talked about this. Um, but you know, uh, it could be him, could be McDavid. It's kind of like picking the Super Bowl MVP. Like, if Canada wins, it's going to be McDavid, and if USA wins, it's going to be Matthews or Kachuk. It's going to be a star. It's not going to be Jacob Slavin. All due respect, like that's just how I see it. Um,
Yeah, I feel you. That's how it normally is. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Reinhart balled out there with that line and managed to average a
point
gosh,
and a half per game.
2 points a game.
Yeah. No, like Sam Reinhart's one of my favorite players in the league. I mean, he's just such a good player. Like he's just such a good player. He's offensively gifted, but he plays a 200-foot game. I mean, his teammate Matt Kachuk on the other side, his Florida Panther teammate on the other side. I mean, it's the same way. It's actually going to be fun because I get to root for the Kachucks. This time I get to root for Austin Matthews. I get to root for Jack Eichel. I get to root for Jack Hughes. Like all these great players that own the Bruins. I get to root for them, and I still get to root against some Maple Leafs players like Mitch Marner. Um, yeah. But what about you? Who's your MVP?
Mm, that's tough. I think. I mean, Team USA is probably Austin Matthews. I think it might be. I mean, for Team Canada, I think it might be Crosby. I think Crosby might be the MVP again because people just forget about how he's still a very well gifted athlete, even though he's up there in age. He's still one of the best doing it at his age.
Yeah, very easy to forget about him on a team that also has McKinnon and McDavid.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, and what's also wild is that like you think about all the good Canadian centers that aren't really in this on this team, like Tavares, and I mean the list could go on for a while, but I'm just like reeling off Tavares, Stamkos, like this team is just like, oh yeah, he's good, he's Canadian. Oh, he's not in the tournament. Oh, okay. No Bedard.
No.
Bergeron retired a couple of years ago. If he was still playing, very likely he could have been in this on this team. Um, yeah, I mean these teams are just full of so much talent. It's kind of hard to pick a most valuable player when like half of these guys are MVP candidates every year on their own regular
Correct.
teams. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it for a while. You and I have been clamoring about this since we started this pod, and even before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think maybe this will be my last question? I'll give you the last word for if you have another question too. But like, do you think this tournament will move the needle among casual fans? Because you and I are hockey, you know,
Mm,
addicts. We're gonna watch this anyway.
I mean, there's not to be honest. The way it's set up, I would say yes. Super Bowl's over, so you take that out of the way. NBA is not doing so hot, so I think this is probably the best stage to put it at. I'm not saying it's gonna take them to that next step or level. I think that next step or level would be next year at the Olympics. I think this is a step forward. I think the Olympics is the step that would potentially shake up the world of sports for NHL in the United States, at least, would be the bolstering of its growth.
Yeah, and like the United States NHL fan bases are very regional.
Yes.
Um, you're not gonna find somebody really anywhere in the Southeast except for Tampa and Miami, for the Panthers and the Hurricanes too. But you're not
Yeah.
gonna find any of those people really tuning in.
No.
So it'd be great if the NHL could grow it, maybe Nashville, Carolina markets, sort of expand there. But really, like I think the NHL wants teams in Atlanta and Houston and places like that. So like if they could grow the game just a little bit in those places on the margins, I think they'd be happy. Like you said, no NFL, um, NBA, college basketball are still going to get eyeballs no matter what, just
Yeah.
because of basketball being what it is here. But yeah, if they could grow it marginally, yeah, I'm with you. I think it could make a difference, but really set up for the Olympic Games.
Yeah. No. It's going to be a fun once we get to the Olympic Games. This will be a first, like I said, first step in some to get there.
It's
So,
an appetizer. Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap up shop here?
gosh, I don't think I have any last minute thoughts. I did have like a spontaneous one of if since Sheldon Keefe has left the Maple Leafs, if the Leafs do not go past the second round for another year in a row, does Mitch Marner think of potentially leaving the Leafs?
I think Mitch Marner's thinking of leaving the Leafs no matter what. I think the cap is going up. There's going to be teams in this summer with a ton of cap space, and he's going to get a bag from somebody. And if I'm him, the way I've been treated by that fan base, by that media market, yeah, I think he's leaving. Short of them winning a Stanley Cup, I think he's out. I think he's out of there.
Okay.
I think if I'm him, I'm leaving. I'm going and getting paid $15 million or more on a team in a warm weather city that doesn't hate my guts. You know? So and the uh the the coaching swap has actually worked out for everybody because the the Devils needed a new voice. You guys needed a new voice,
Yeah.
and last year was expectations were here and reality was here. Sheldon Keefe has brought them to a level playing field, and you are where you're supposed to be, competing for playoffs with a good young core. Meanwhile, the Leafs they needed an adult in the room, and Craig Berube's an adult in the room, and they're competing for the division. So I think everyone what wins there. I also think everybody wins if Marner goes and finds a new place to play because the Leafs are still going to be an attractive team to anybody because like probably 10% of the league is from that area. You know, all these guys grow up in Ontario wanting to play for the Maple Leafs. So they're always going to have money to spend on guys that want to play there, and maybe Marner can go get a fresh start. So like, doesn't always have to be be like that. But I think in this case it is.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Okay. One last question, and then I swear we're gonna just because I haven't, I would need to ask. What was your favorite Super Bowl commercial from yesterday?
Mm, gosh. Um. Oh, I think it was the Pringles and the Little Caesars one with the mustache flying.
Uh, yeah.
I think
Okay.
I think
All
that
right. Solid. The one I forget which one. The one with Eugene Levy was funnier than the other one, whichever one that was.
gosh, I can't
The guy
remember.
from American Pie and Schitt's Creek.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. There's some
Yeah.
there were some good commercials for this time.
Yeah. Okay. I'm boring. My favorite before we wrap up shop was um. Oh God, what's his name? Harrison Ford in the Jeep.
Oh, the Jeep commercial.
Yeah.
Yes.
When he says, you know, even though I'm a Ford, that was pretty funny. That
That's
was
a
a
good
good ending to a very good message and a good commercial. So I'm
correct.
boring. That was my favorite. I also, I'm, you know, give me the Glenn Powell one was pretty funny, where he's telling the nursery rhymes to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But the one after with literally right after with Sydney Sweeney and the Mayo, I mean, that was that was right there. But I had to go with the Harrison Ford.
Okay.
All right, Kyle. We'll have this up for the listeners on Tuesday night. So if you're listening Wednesday or throughout the rest of the week, these games are underway. We hope you enjoy them. We'll come back to you sometime soon and talk about how it all shook out. But I appreciate you all listening. Kyle, thanks for joining us again. This has been Odd Man Rush.